Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast.
It's
My
your two
name,
favorite hosts,
yes, my name is Evan, and this is,
Jesus Olivera.
yep. Today we're going to be talking about the Crucible Act 3. To be more specific, we're going to talk about women's rights in the 1600s versus how they're perceived today. Well, in the Crucible Act 3, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving pieces with Abigail, John Proctor, Elizabeth Proctor, the other girls Abigail's with, and Judge Danforth. There's a lot of people, a lot of talking, a lot of manipulation, specifically with Elizabeth Proctor. She in the courtroom, she's not perceived as a real person. She's not taken as a good witness. She's not taken on the same level as John Proctor.
Yeah, she's really viewed as just like John's wife, so she doesn't really have that much as a right. But back then, they didn't really view women as like something to take serious. They would only take all the word from the men,
Yep. Yep.
and they give us There's a lot of examples of how women's rights were ignored in
Yes.
the Crucible, especially in Act 3 when they were in. That was when they were in the court, right?
Yes. Yes. The
So even
big
in the
court.
courtroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, even in the Supreme Court, they had no women as judges, right?
Yep.
We can see that. Like they didn't even have power back then. And they just really they weren't really viewed as something important. And then compared to now, where women have the right to vote, there's women in the Supreme Court, there's women that have political power now,
Yep. Yep.
and there's even women that are billionaires.
Yep. That's all true.
So so the world has changed a lot. And then compared to the Crucible, we see a lot of examples compared to him back then to now.
Yeah. I could see like one thing that immediately just kind of stood out to me is just the legal representation. Just nobody really had a say in anything till the supernatural got involved. Like Abigail, unless she was manipulating people, she had no say in her life till that day. How do you feel about that?
I
Feel
mean,
that's
that's
fair?
true. She was really, even as you we can clearly see that the uncle, the way that her uncle treated her, and then even with John Proctor, she was how old? She was 16, right?
Chick 16, yeah.
16, and she was working as a housewife for John Proctor, who wasn't even related to her in any way.
Yep. I,
And later, she was just abolished by his wife. She was kicked out, and then she went with her abusive uncle.
yeah. I feel as though that all the women in Salem were just kind of controlled by fear the entire time they were there. None of them were able to be themselves because they were oppressed by others in the Crucible or in Salem in the 1600s.
Yeah. Yeah, we can see that really well most of the women that we can see that all the people that were accused, they
Yeah.
were all women.
Yes, they all
hmm So I think they just had a different view of women back then, and it wasn't really they didn't really look at them in a good way. They just saw something that they could easily manipulate and control.
yeah. There's just like you could see a bunch of the themes like power, agency, and just like they couldn't get their voice across in the modern women's rights movements. In the contextual background, it's just like everything that's happened so far. And so John Proctor tries to expose Abigail as a fraud. The court's handling of women's testimonies, and they just have a dramatic confrontation and between the women and the men. But there's not a lot of standing up for themselves in this time. It's not really accepted. Most people just kind of sit in the back and don't let anything They just keep going the way they've been going.
Yeah, and we can see that even in as there was a lot of viewers for all the drama that was going on,
Yeah.
there was there was a lot of people just spectating, and then they didn't really try to do anything and stand up for the women
Yep.
and their rights. They were just treated like just criminals, like witches.
Yeah, like you were saying, like any woman who tried to speak out was just seen as a hysterical, just like a witch. They weren't like normal. It was normal to do whatever a man said. It was normal to do whatever your father said.
Yeah. And even back then, like if they didn't listen, they didn't really have a choice. Women really couldn't do much because the men back then they were way more powerful than the women,
Yep.
and they made a lot of threats to them. They had jails. They would throw them in jail.
They would throw
They,
them in jail. They would make them sit in a prison cell. Um,
uh-huh.
I wanted to talk about some accusations that women could have had in the past against men in power. They were just thrown aside as being just not factual. They were not taken as seriously as other accusations from a man to a man or a woman to a woman.
Yeah.
Like Elizabeth to Abigail, that was taken pretty seriously because they're on like society had them on the same level. And for John Proctor and Abigail, she's moved up in her kind of hierarchical state of being above what a woman's regular place is by being manipulative of Salem.
Mm-hmm. And we can see that it really relates to the present, like the present world, as we can see that some women still aren't really taking that serious.
Yeah.
Some out there that there's some women that are there's a lot of what is it, abusive husbands out there.
Oh yes, very
There's a
much.
lot of cases of sexual assault, sexual abuse,
Yes,
abuse in
yes.
relationships. So that's really a big connection from real life to the crucible. The
Humongous.
crucible,
The biggest.
yeah.
Um, modern day, we're still struggling for women's rights. Not every place has women's rights. I feel as though some places in the Middle East, they just you have to appeal to your father to leave the house. You couldn't even drive as a woman in the United Arab Emirates until the 2018. Can you believe that?
Damn.
Oh, damn. That's crazy.
So they really have like a they're really way more controlled in other
Yes,
foreign countries.
more um set in their ways, I guess, the culture and the religion and the just the way society's organized.
Yeah. Speaking about religion, they even in the Crucible, they
Yeah.
were really heavy on Christianity, and that
Yeah.
really influenced a lot of women to act a certain way too.
Yeah.
Like just how you mentioned the people in the Middle East, the Muslim people, they're really strict the way they act. They don't show their hair.
Yep.
They're really kept to themselves. And in the Crucible, they have the biggest religion that they show is Christianity. They believe in God, and then women would have to be viewed as like something that are something soft, like something to be taken care of.
Yep.
But that wasn't really the case in the Crucible.
Yep.
But religion did really play a big role.
Yeah, we can see religion taking a lot of in the Middle East. We can see religion having a big influence on the laws and the societal norms in that place. And I want to get back into the Crucible. I wanted to talk about Abigail's control over the other girls and just she was manipulative of the court system and she was really driven by personal vendettas and she uses the church to do that. And the court largely dismissed them until they wanted to get in with the hysteria crowd unless they were specifically going to what the man wanted or the man were saying, they were dismissed. They had to act a certain way. They still have to in the Middle East and in the Crucible. It's very similar in that way. You had to act a certain way or you would be treated as different.
Yeah, and what's it called? They were really limited to what they could do. Women, they were really limited of their freedom, and they didn't really have much movement. They couldn't organize. Like right now, we see that people can protest, peaceful
Yes,
protests in the
yes,
United
yes,
States.
yes. I wanted to talk about that next, and if you don't mind me interrupting you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. So I wanted to talk about women and Susan B. Anthony in specifically. I wanted to talk about how she is just a way forward for America. She helped women get the right to vote, and that was many peaceful protests until they were able to get that right. And I feel like that was one of the most important steps forward we had as a country, along with the
Yeah,
laws to try and stop discriminatory acts like unequal pay for women and men.
yeah. And we can also see that even with African American women too,
Yes.
I feel like they were really a much bigger problem. They were treated way differently. In the Crucible, we can relate that. We can see Tituba, who is an African American slave who works for um
Yeah.
she works for one of the families in the Crucible, and
For
she was
river
accused. She
parents.
was one of Yeah, and she was accused of being one of the witches,
Yeah,
but they didn't really take her serious. They really got straight to the point with her, and they forced her to
admit. They didn't give her
yeah,
a chance to explain herself, and we can see that kind of keep going into the Act 3 and other parts of the story.
yeah. And in real life too, African American women, they're really viewed as like a way different thing. So we see that people they had racist views towards African Americans,
Yep.
and they would I feel like they were treated more or less like they trusted them more or less than than white people, than Americans.
Yes. I actually wanted to talk about jobs. Like, what kind of jobs could women get in Salem, and what kind of jobs can they get today? Or what kind of jobs can they get in the Middle East today?
Yeah, so in Salem they didn't really mention much about jobs. Most of the women were just housewives.
Yeah, they couldn't really, they had a lack of education, so they had no really upward movement in society or the workforce due to that kind of hindrance or discrimination. Um, in the Middle East, I don't think there's a lot of education for the female literacy rate in the world is around 88%. Do you want to know what the male percentage is?
What is it?
99.
Damn, that's a big jump.
Yeah. There's a wage gap, there's a literacy gap, there's women are still fighting for control today.
Yeah, even up to today, it's crazy how even today that people have so much rights and women are still having to fight about some stuff.
Yep. Yep. I feel like we need to do our part as American citizens to help women get to where they need to be on equal footing with men.
Yeah, and women need to stand up and keep fighting for their rights. I feel like women are really strong. They're more united,
Yes, yes. I
and they
feel as
know
though if you
what's
take
right.
anything from what we said today, it's that you need to help the women in your life and the women in this country of America. And even let's broaden it out. Let's say the women around the world. We need you to take some action. Look into taking some action. Volunteer to help get them to equal footing, to close that literacy gap, close the pay gap, let
and
women have
empower
free choice with their bodies. And is that all?
and just overall empower themselves.
Yes, we need to empower women around the world.
Yeah. That that was really a big topic that really needed to be out there, and people really
Yes.
needed to hear about that.
Yeah.
So I guess that's all we have to say.
Yup, that's all we have to say.
Peace.
Like, subscribe, more podcasts. You tell
Coming
us
soon.
what we're gonna podcast. What's the next topic?